Wewawo nkwaniriza ku Baba TV neno TV eyobwacha bazinga program the platform olunaku lwa balaza enaku ly'omwezi 18 mwezi guno ogwokuna mwaka 2022 baganda bange abakristaayo mwebala okuba atenga mmaze ku egandalo erya Pasika kuva olunaku olwokutaano olunaku olw'omukaaga olunaku olwa Sunday n'olwaleero ebeire Easter Monday. Mwena abasobola okuba atenga musanuka mu ngeri ed'endawulo n'abakaali masanu muyogayoge kuba atenga mutuuse ku lunaku luno olwaleero tulijja kuba atenga tumalaku enaku ed'eigandalo tusobola okuba atenga tuirayo tukola resume normally tusobola okuba atenga tuyingiza ku mpiya de twasansaaniza nize Samuel Omwesigwa omwanduzi ate era omukubiriza owa program on the platform every single Monday kuva essaawa 4 paka essaawa 6 gw'obwire tusobola okuba atenga twogera ku nsonga enkulu n'edo edakusikibwa nga munda mu iganga lino erya Uganda ni kulya kwa Uganda oba olyawo ezeyabikukobera munda mu iwanga lino erya Uganda embeera ya bwikaikamu abafunye ebizibu tubasaasireku of course eri abasanuka n'eri abanga balina ebizibu that is life olyawandika akatabo yakuba that's life mwatu so tubalansinga byonna twasobola okuba atenga tukawo so iwobanga olina kyotuuseeku yoga bisengalo mu maiso omusiraamu akoba alhamdulillah okuba ntya katonda webala okuba atenga ontuusiisa wana abaisiraamu mwena munaatera okuba atenga mu nzika ekisiibo olunaku luno olwokutaano baba kyabazinga wa Busoga mwene kyalo alijja kuba atenga asiibulula abaisiraamu olwokutaano luno era nkulaalike iye ali eyo ndakuwa enteekateeka enkalamu wedde n'atambula aye nga baba asiimye ate baba wasiima ninzaani nze mwedukulu be mutabanewe nsobola okuba atenga munange nkuzigiraku waba asiimye okutwiwula ife abasiibye tusobola okuba atenga munange tumwebaza so n'ebindi ku ebyo ebinaatambula wano ni wale ensonga y'abalimi abantu abasuubula abalima n'abakola mu kirime ekyemwani likayogeza abantu obwama here and there but of course tina ekyo ekisooka mu iwanga lino erya Uganda ng'abantu bamonopolizing akatale mu bintu eby'endawulo the result is ekisembayo okunkomero kiri nti business emaze yatambula eti emaze yaba leveled oba esigaire ng'ekaali aganaaga ife ng'abantu abaikiriza eno mu kulima setutera okuba atenga tulinga cause that the destiny of money cause na wali akatale era omuntu wabanga ali kulima nga ali suubula fena tulowooza kutunda nda wa Uganda era tubanga tunze nda wa Uganda twafuna ku sente taida wanu mulimi edda kusobola okuba atenga asanuka so ensonga edo mbaye ndikwogera kuku ni minister omuto w'ensonga ed'ebyobulimi mbere wakuba naye nga bakayongera okuba atenga munange baddetegereza n'abantu abandi tidi lwaki abakugu balikyesa ino aye benesho bedasobola okuba atenga bakigusa oba olyawo aye katusabe nti siigukire ng'omuna Uganda afunyemu ku the platform ona kuno olwaleero ninaku omunamateeka asomesa amateeka yagasoma muwandiisi wa bitabo era nga ebitabo byawandiise bingi ino bikyusiisa obulamu obw'abantu tujja kuba ate nga twogera ku nsonga nningi ino kutafuta amateeka muntu wakoba nti Uganda efugira ku nfuga ey'amateeka Uganda tufugira ku mateeka Uganda tufugisa mateeka ebintu ebyo byandawulo n'ebindi ku ebyo betwidde okuba ate nga tulingako tusobola okuba ate nga ensonga eyo tugigusa nkwaniriza Baba TV
nsanga era okubawuliza neyanziza Baba
era
nsanga okuba ku mukutu guno gwa platform mukisa munene ino ogwompaire okuba nti nsobola okugabanaku ni baganda bange ni bannaze n'ab'emikwano era ndeeta greetings from Center for Critical Thinking and Alternative Analysis from Dr. Mahiri Balunywa, Professor Yuha Mukwanason, Professor Afuna Adula, ni members ba Su Generis team abatuyamba mu research gye tukola nga bweyogere ku bitabo bitera okuwandiika nga wetidde okubona
Okay, tukweyanziza Kanso Lubogo Christopher Isaac. Amaina nga mazeyo bulungi.
Yes, sebo gamazeyo bulungi ino.
Yeah.
Era gamala bumalinga wegali baba.
Ago wegali gati.
Yes, sebo.
Okay, nenda tutandikire wene awo. Ensonga y'okuwandiika ebitabo munda mu iganga lino erya Uganda ne ku luka lwa Africa. Tino omuze ogubaire omukalamu ino nti Abannayuganda n'Abafirika bagwenda ino. Era ebiseera ebisinga niwe wandiika akatabo nga ka peegi 5 n'okawa omuntu okasoma. Tikiba kyangu ino. Abantu twenda enemba batwembera enemba wasiri obubaka bube mu nemba daani otuwandiikira. Kuba olina ng'omunamateeka nti okuyamba Uganda wasalawo okuwandiika bino bite mu bitabo. Bani abo boli wandiikira bolowooza nti balijja bisoma by'owandiika.
Ekibuuzo ky'obuuza muganda wange kirungi. Nda startinga ni quote ya Mavis Gavin yakoba ati the world has made black people a crime. I intend to make it a virtue. Writing eri abantu abairugavu, in most cases it's a privilege of a little few people. Abantu abasinga ni ideologies zide nedigemagana n'okuwandika nga bwedi bakoba ati woyenda okweka ekintu kikweke ng'okitaire mu kitabo omwidegavu taide asobola kukizuula. Bwe twawulira ebigambo ebigemagana ni endowooza oti neyo twalowooza nti I think this is offensive to our intellectual acumen ife nga abairugavu. So twaka nti no, I think we have to rise up the game. I think the idea is not to understand but to overstand. There's a difference between understanding and overstanding.
Eriyo okutegeera n'okutegeera ino ba.
Idea eriyo okutegeera nga okategeera wansi w'ekigambo understand and then overstanding. So kyendigezaako okwinonera nti
tekategeire tujje mpola mpola. Understand n'okutegeera ekigambo wansi
like the English
language. Oba tokitegeire. Kati overstand okitegeera weego.
Overstand, that's the ideology gyendigezaako propounding nti olina okutegeera ekintu okusiikamu ngeri nga gikina okubaamu. Era eryo kyebeeta the law of the negation of the negation. Meaning nti olina arguinga byoyogera from what they call a thesis to an antithesis to a synthesis. And this is the ideology I'm saying. Background yefenga abasoga, let me begin this way. Bantu balina ideology ne gyebaka ati omusoga ategeera ku myaka which is I think is a fallacy and a misnomer in law. I think basogas are fine pencils in God's hands. In my opinion, abasogana abantu Katonda who were ordained with their incredible abilities. As you realize ebitawendide okugezaako okwinonola nti skills d'abasoga dili innate. Perhaps better said skills d'abantu dili innate. Era nti Katonda atwendeza okutegeera. We only minimize okutegeera kwaife okusinziira ku how much we expose ourselves. Ayi gy'okoma okwewaayo mu kintu gy'okoma okufuna okuganulwa n'okitegeera. Ebiseera ebisinga eri abakoba ati I think it was Professor Kanyehamba yakoba ati gye nkoma okujja mu maiso ngandega gye nkoma okubona nti TD. Abasinga balooza nti gye bakoma okujja mu maiso nga basoma gye balooza nti ampera anofise wa kitalo. No. Alvin Jaffa yakoba lala, the illiterate of the 21st century is not the person who cannot learn but one who is able to learn, unlearn and relearn. So
osoma kabiri wabo noti tosomye kabiri wera mu wasoma.
Absolutely. So mbaye niwe nga tulikwegeya mwana kanti muna you have 2 degrees nga bwonkobeire. I virtually when I look at it in terms of intellectual acumen, especially in terms of the legal perspective, still inkweta anti you are still unlearned. Until you embrace the law, then we shall call you.
There is the way you people.
Then we shall call you learned.
There is the way you people. Mulina situation the learned friends.
Absolutely.
As if those are the only people that are learned.
Why do we call ourselves learned? Orensonga nti amateka, it's the only skill. It's the only discipline ekwegesa interpreting all other disciplines as if you're an expert. But if I'm, for example, going to cross-examine a medical doctor or musawo, I should be having those facets and skills. Edin sobozesa okuba nti nsobola okwinonola n'okutoola yensobidde omusawo dakoze ki dakoze era nakanti omusawo okagwire
just ngoli quoting amateeka
nga ndiko tenga ndi mulaga kino kuba bwenja ku engineer the same thing bwenja ku musomesa the same thing so there's only one profession which is called learn friend. No wonder, and there's a lot of pride in it, by the way.
So you just create pride, you people, abasoma amateeka, you just you created an empire for yourself, a cocoon or a fence. To
no, actually it's not an empire. It is even not my words. I'm going to quote you another person, Bamweta Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, who was actually widely regarded as one of the wisest lawyers in America. Aina theory jabeta legal realism, jaida nayo. Akobati wanting to become a lawyer is divinely inspired. So please forgive the lawyers. Tiba chendera. Aye katonda yachibataku yabeta and they are ordained with that unfathomable knowledge and they are given those keys okuba nanti bayamba abantu. That's why we call this a noble profession, a learned profession, and for all intents and purposes, they are people who serve society.
Okay, God, you will be also calling me to become a learned friend. Tubele tuli wale kuandika ebitabo. Recently wano tuboye n'abandi ku bawandiisi b'ebitabo mu iwanga erya Uganda nga ba crashing with the authorities. Okuwandika ebitabo kuona kufuuse political oba abandi ku bawandiisi b'ebitabo n'abafuuse political nti you are using authors mu Uganda okwenda okutanishinga n'okucommunicatinga obusungu bwe mulina ku some authorities ediri mu government.
Eriyo kyebeta defensive writing and then offensive writing. Ebiseera ebisinga abantu abasinga bw'owandiika they may take leverage against you okuba nti kyoli wandika kiri offensive against them.
According to them.
But sometimes nga wendikoba, I think one of the things you need to understand buli wandika, first of all, I think it's Professor Mamdana Yakoba argument in sometimes writing can have that selfish identity in itself. Omuntu awandika okusinziira ku ekyo kyayidi era kyayinza okupropoundinga because of his ideologies. But aye eri abawandika olw'okuba nti bali kwenda kuyamba igwanga. One of them is the kind of person that I do. Ebitabo bye ndi wandika, for example, that I've written perhaps now 20 running are not those areas that people have actually well acquainted themselves with. Bye bayogera ku buliido. We are actually sailing in what they call uncharted waters. Tugezaako okuwandika ideologies n'ebintu ebyo ebitoogerekangako. In other words, ndikwenda quoting omwami gwebeta Bernard Shaw yakoba ati most people see things as they are and that's why. I dream of things that are not and that's why not. So ebiseera ebisinga nze tiwandika olw'okubanga gundi akiwandiise no. I want to go for those uncharted waters. Kubanga nchidi nti research, argumentative research. Because what we do, research helps you to explore. Eri ekigambo kyebeta ati write or cite or publish or cite and then or perish. So ebiseera ebisinga w'omulimu intellectualism as opposed to scholarism. Oyina ogezaako okubona nti kyoli wandika kiyamba abantu gye kijooganirwa. Everything bino bitukola be thriving am research.
So does it mean nti abawandiisi bazira buzibu abasoma n'abakootinga abawandiisi obubi?
Abawandiisi bazira buzibu olw'ensonga nti eriyo kyebeta intellectual freedom. You know, right now tuli mu television eno, I don't know the aspirations in terms of the objectives and ideals of Baba TV, for example. I am a free thinker. So sometimes niniza okwogera ekintu okusinziira bwe nkibona. And sometimes when I write and you're not happy with it, I simply tell you, please repent. That as simple as that.
That was your observation. So if it was your observation, and if somebody takes it to be offensive to him, nakoba nti the intention je wabere nayo okuwandika as if wabali kwendalaga public the mischief, the ill, the black side of myself, and when I'm in leadership, it means olingo olina obubaka bw'oli communicatinga obukuma mu bantu omuliro.
Interestingly, nga bw'okobye, writing is I think Stephen Bako Yakobati I write actually was apprehended and even incarcerated for some time. But Yakobati I write what I feel. Sometimes people write as you write nga bw'okobye, perhaps to pinch holes into certain ideologies or propositions. Ayenga writing nga bw'enkobye has different paradigms. Oyinza okuwandika for purposes of building, oyinza okuwandika for purposes of critique. And for me, when I write in terms of critique, then someone should be able to take it in terms of whichever constructive criticism. Kubanga someone can come and tell you ntimuna somewhere gundi yo tojivaire bulungi. Koti tojivaire bulungi. don't be offended by that. Linga mobone, perhaps chali koba chidikozachi, chida kuyamba. So sometimes we now defensive mechanism when we get to building around ourselves. Nti fetitu kobe wako.
Bale beba wandikako.
Beba wandikako. Titu kobe wako. So we miss the point. So critiquing is good. There is no person who is above critiquing. Even Almighty God, by the way, everything I think you've seen how people have written books about even the things that actually go against the God Himself. But so argument generally comment writing should be taken in its right perspective. As long as it's not tainted with what they call vice or malified, as long as it's not frivolous and vexatious.
There is somebody that was quoting Yakobanti. A certain writer X, a series of books that one see. Dona dividing the pinchinga hole in one individual, in one system. Or Yakobanti, is it that that's the only area you sit right on? Even when you are seeing something you are critiquing and you want somebody to change and do what? Why is it that that's the only thing you see and you want to write on?
As a writer, speaking from my experience in terms of writing, I'll quote that popular saying in Era Joyenzi, Solis Populi, Solis Vei. The welfare of the people should be supreme. Okay? And, Vex Populi, Vox Vei. The voice of God becomes the voice of people. So Chetwenda ultimately is that how do we improve society? To me, that's my origin of terms of writing.
Yeah.
Now, for examples from the books that I'm going to read for you or probably quote for you. Ngandikeza kulaga nti ngawe nkobi offensive writing may not be helpful, but constructive writing may be helpful. So ebisere bisinga it's us people abalina ekizibu kye tukola nakyo. Critiquing is not bad. Critiquing will only help you to improve if you take it in the right perspective. Aye buli wowandiika ng'oli kwenda kuzimba igwanga, ng'oli kwenda ku changing a society, ng'oli oleta ideologies edizimba. I think that is good. It's actually healthy. It's a healthy debate in terms of good intellectual pluralism and even in terms of growing a nation.
Is it legally wise? Kiri mu mateeka nti omuwandiisi waaba awandiise ekintu nga okitwaire nti you have been offended. Okupanishinga omuwandiisi oyo mu mateeka oba weno osobola owandiika ekituufu okutoolawo kiri?
Usually, if mu mateeka eryo kyebeta slander and libel, sometimes when omuntu waba awandiise ekintu nga it is actually tainting you. Kiri reducing in what they call right thinking members of society. Nga tichitufu fabricated, for example. Ngechigendera kyakyo kuku onona ewelina ayi ngati muzira mazima gamu. Then you have a right to go against that individual because it is tainting your image as an individual.
But you said somebody can write.
Absolutely. The freedom to write is there. But then your freedom should not be extended in such a way that actually infringes on my freedom. So your writing should be in such a way that it has directions, it is perhaps productive, it is truth, by the way. In fact, one of the defense for libel or slander is actually truth. Nti nikwogera machi? Nikwogera mazima. Ayi wobanga oli fabricating information. Ngacholi wandika chili tainted with malified, frivolous and vexatious. Then I can argue and say, ekigenda ky'omuntu ono tichirungi. Aligeza kubwako ono nalina lyachi? Yeah. But there are those who argue. For example, we all know when kubuza ani goba single kogera ko obubi kuigwanga lino omwidi, but how many times does he raise up his hands and say, by the way, olikoba ABCD? Sometimes I think you have to use what they call a contempt card. Jacob and omuntu ayinza okogera ku ekintu and you simply ignore it. It will pass with the sweeping waters
and it will never be
because every time you hit it and doesn't stick on your wall, let it pass.
That's kadi ya binamunana adi bisokusawa eina kampumule mu katun tunabatenga tuize Counsel Christopher Lubogo alina obutabo bungi bwawandiise. Bisere bisinga atafuite mateeka. Twidda kwira wati kyenkobye nti Uganda tufugira ku mateeka oba Uganda tukolera ku nfuga ya mateeka. The difference of the two. Tubona amateeka nagatusumbua oba ebizibu bye tulina kubaga tukolesa mateeka. Ninze Sam Omwesigwa ndikwira otava. Okay, welcome back in our show. Tuli msawo yeffe esooka kitundu kyaffe ekyokubiri program the platform. Ninze Sam Omwesigwa yosinzira okuba atenga tubona nenda kwebaza Baba TV osobola okuba ate ng'otugoberera ku Twitter ku kibanda kyaife ekya Twitter. Ku Twitter twagulayo ekibanda era munange osobola okujja mu maka gaife ago waba ate ng'otubona niwo oba totambwire oba otambwire oli mu njira oba oli kujaawa ku Baba TV Uganda niwo oba oli ku Facebook Baba Television Uganda niwo oba oli ku YouTube ku Baba TV Uganda. Osobola okukolesa app ku isimu lyo ojja mu Google Play Store otole mu Baba Media app. Era kusobola okuba ate ng'owulisa 87.7 Baba FM okwoteire ni Baba TV okwoteire ni ku website www.babatv.co.ug ku backstream etambula 24 hours. Program the platform tuli kulingira ku ntafute y'amateeka mu iwanga lino erya Uganda. Ignorance of the law tekutola ku musango wakuba oti nze tyategeera ntera obona abantu bawandiika ebiwandiike toyiwa wano kasasiro bakiwandiika mu Luganda oba mu Lusoga. Omuntu atayidi Luganda na Lusoga aida kuidayiwe okubanga byowandiisa abatabidi we munamugema mujamu twamukuba titwawandiikawo aya atenga idea awo mudama idea awo muswahili mushotala tabidi. So ignorance of the law tetegeeza nti ozira musango. Professor Isaac Lubogo Christopher muwandiisi wa bitabo munamateeka agasomesa wetugire mukuumula ng'oli tulaga ebindi ku bitabo by'owandiise. Naye ndi kulingirira ekitabo ekyag'entebe eno obuwanvu and I was wondering nti muna Uganda ki muna Africa ki ali gy'osoma ekitabo ekyo but watukoba nti tuwandiika ku mysteries edo abasinga de batawandiikako. One nenda tuninge ku bindi ku bitabo by'owandiise. Osinze ino iwe kutayisira kuki nti nze nkulaza abawandiisi betubaire nabo betuboine nti abandi bawandiika ku byobufuzi nga balingirira loopholes edikaali mu nsonga ed'ebyobufuzi bya African democracy. Abandi bawandiika ku bukulembeze, abandi bapinchinga holes mu government yebeeriwo. Babona nti biyamba society yo wakuba oti nze njawandiika kubitategeerekeka. What is your interest? Bani boyenda communicating?
Ekibuzo kya buvunaanyizibwa ino era ndikwenda ku emphasizing argument gy'okobe nti ignorantia non excusat.
Ignorantia non excusat. Yeah.
Ignorance of the law is no excuse. Era wa emphasizing the principle of legality. Nti tosobola kuba oti bw'okola kino you are culpable to this bobanga ekintu tikiwandikibwa muki
mu lulimi lwotegeera
mu mateeka.
But better way sintu ekyo just okuzaawo katono mu mateeka nze olwo abayawandiika byentayidi can't explain nti situefu mmenya amateeka ayenze ebyo tiyabitegeera tibidi up to now.
Anti the problem is that going to ignorance and excuse that at the legal franca of Uganda is what is English. So this argument nti muna ekintu kiba kiwandiise mu Luzungu, you know, but it's a question of defense. Motot law, we have what they call disclaimers, we have ebintu byokuba nti whatever notices you want to put should actually be, you know, evidenced enough nti nsobola okukibona, you know, but most of the things byewumulira nti if you urinate here there's a fine of this, those are scarecrows for lack of a better word. As long as it's not designated mateka, then fundamentally they are what? They are scarecrows, but we shall get there.
We don't need to fear so much.
You have to simply have to hire a good lawyer who knows the law.
It is not even gazetted that so and so wrote on his wall.
I know
that don't power here, don't litter here.
I know they probably could argue in terms of nuisance and stuff like that, or public nuisance. Most of the things, you see, that's the mystery of the law, and that's the argument. We under sui generis to gezako could demystifying the law, or could you on hands on, so that everyone can actually be a beneficiary of the what of the law, because the law is supposed to aid you and help you, amazima. You know, although in most cases lawyers are looked at as you know, bad people. No wonder Shakespeare about the first thing we do, let's kill all lawyers. I think just Charles Dickens says in his book that actually, you know, the law is an ass. One of my books that I wrote is called Freedom Through the Law. My argument is actually trying to demystify the law as a dogma. This idea of the law as it is shall be forever and ever. My argument is in terms of what they call legal realism. The law should actually change with the changing environment. You know,
amateeka gabemu obuntu bulamu.
Excellent. Mba ndikwida je ndikwida joli kudde. In fact, one of the books era joli kwogeraku nikyebeta obuntu bulamanda what? Obuntu bulamanda lo. Bw'obona ekitabo kino, permit me read something very small for you and you'll be amazed at it.
So when you are writing amateeka and obuntu bulamu, it's like oli tukoba nti amateeka agaliwo gazira mu buntu bulamu.
Because of what is Ubuntu Bulamu? Ubuntu Bulamu, okusinzira ku people like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who is actually my mentor, is that he says that for whatever reason, you cannot be what you are meant to be until I am what I'm meant to be. In other words, our lives are inextricably bound. Tosobola kuba ekyo kyolina kuba, okutuula nga nze ndi ekyo kye nina okuba. Your life is indirectly intertwined with mine. If I am perfect, you are perfect. If you are imperfect, I am imperfect.
Is it because we are working in the community nti buli omu alina okuba ngako alina okuba kyali tukolera walala oba osobola okuba ebyozena n'aba ebyange every person is done
ngabasoga bakoba nti agali awala nakola gatya
nagalumema.
Yes, so let me read something very small for you. Why I make this argument in terms of chebeta African jurisprudence. If you like, oyinza okundeta omuntu ali awakeninga ebirowoozo by'abayirugavu nga bwe nkobe Marvin Gavin yakoba ati the world has made being black a vice. We intend to make it a virtue. So the world has made, us Africans as being a vice. But I think we have to redeem ourselves in terms of renaissance, intellectual renaissance. Let me give you a very small story. In America, America, the black people, for using the word Americans, Babatala from the shores of Africa, your grandfathers, my grandfathers, incredibly, do you know that the first ship that actually traded them off the oceans was called Jesus?
For which purposes?
Slave trade. I am coming, right? And when they were taken to those islands and actually traded in those different diasporas, one of the things was a guy called Henry Lynch. The word Lynch was never in a dictionary. Tichari dictionary. It was the name of a person, guy we didn't know Samuel. But because of his diabolical methods of treating Abairugav, that's how they came the word Lynch. Nga what they used to do ngabagemo muirugavu basiba omukono on one side on a horse, bageme chigere chira basiba on one side on a horse. They get this other hand on the other side of the horse, facing opposite direction. Then they beat the horses so badly, set fires under the private parts, and tear them into pieces. And they say, Chikole maiso gabairugavu, abato, abakazi, n'abaana. And then get the dogs. Let the dogs, embwa dinembwa. Let the dogs go and bite off the private parts of dabachala ni breasts. Do that before the niggers. Put the fear of God in them. Keep the body. Take the mind. Kuoma omubiri twala obwongo. So my argument is to actually bring back your righteous mind.
There is something I read. It was kind of a joke. I nashingiriza nga nze nashinterpretinga so deeply nti in Genesis okutandika balontunga balijja okuziika bambala ngoeki.
In Genesis,
no, I mean muntandiko wano nti okulaga abantu balijja okuziika bambala engoye
they usually black clothes to depict sadness, as if black connotes sadness.
And olingirira emotoka eba n'empira gya black waigulu y'abanderu and every person feels nti something black, something so down. It is the other nkyokobye nti kyatandika ira.
Stereotype. And they forget that actually, by the way, from history, immemorial, if you argue, by the way, the first inventors of cars were blacks. The first inventors of medicine were blacks. This so-called ancient Egypt, was actually a black nation. I want you to, the secret relationship between the blacks and the Jews. Then you realize how much civilization actually began in Africa. Then you realize how your so-called black melanin has an advantage over, the other colored domains, and I'm not trying to be racist in any way. I indigeza propounding the ideology. Africa has to discover itself. Let me read this for you, and that's the point I was trying to make here for purposes of emphasis. Listen to this. This was a statement in 1835 by who? By Lord Macklel, ngali addressing a British Parliament. Yakobachi, oida kuvunula, like they say. I've traveled across the length of the breadth of Africa. I have not seen one person who is a beggar, who is a thief. Such wealth have I seen in his country, such moral values, such caliber, that I do not think will ever conquer this country unless we break the very backbone of its nation, which is her spiritual and cultural heritage. Therefore, I propose that we replace her old and ancient education system, her culture, for if the African think that what is foreign and English is good and greater than their own, they will lose their self-esteem, their native culture, and they will become what we want them, a truly dominated nation.
Okay. Nti ntambwire obuvo n'obwiro ku lukalu lwa Africa. Tibonangayo ku muntu asabiriza oba omwibi. Aya ate nga abantu ku lukalu lwa Africa bantu bakikashandawulo ino basobola okuwangula bawamba ensi yayo singa babanga balingirirwa ku mbala yaibwe kalusho nga tibalowooziza nti olulimi oluzungu n'ekintu ekisinga amaani.
Mu ngeri edindi ng'aligezaako kuba ati ebintu byaife eb'ekirugavu bagezeeko okubivunza, ennono daife ed'ekirugavu tugezeeko okudivunza, amateeka gaife ag'ekirugavu tugezeeko okugivunza, ideologies daife ed'ekirugavu tugezeeko okugivunza, so that tuleete ebirowoozo byaife ebiyaka. Take an example of COVID. Professor Ogwang yayogerachi when he was invading COVID, abantu abasinga basooka baamuvuma baakuba, some of us were even thrown off forums olwokubanga propounding a Professor Ogwang. Now the entire world eri yankobe in America actually nti COVID-X is actually doing magic in America. Era abantu batwala obubox bubitirivu babutwala mu America now.
Than in Uganda.
In Uganda it's actually doing the same.
We are still struggling to shika kase to college.
It is still there, by the way, because the NDA I think passed it. So the argument this ideology of Okoroza and everything black is evil. I think Malcolm X nyaso kochikoba. If you remember Malcolm X bamugeba bamuta muikomera. You know, when he was there, he was reading the dictionary and everything that was black ngabali kuchitaku in terms of negative. Malcolm X had to write another dictionary in his own English. So the time has come that Africa has to discover itself. To know
how big the burden looks so big nti just kuandika nti ideology je tuliku je tutambuliraku tusoma luzungu ero yagana nti omwana omuto azaalibwa n'atandika okwogera oluzungu. That's the pride of the parent. Akana kole kagezi akana katandise kakatonga kaidi oluzungu kuandika obuwandiko so kinakyusa the inferiority complex eri mu Africans nti we can't.
When you look at some of the books that were written by the Nigerians like Chinua Achebe, Oboidukira, one of the things when Okonkwo had to go to a foreign land, one of his fear was that he will lose his identity. Know their ways, understand their methods. Get the good things. So my argument is that not simply throw away whatever they do. No, definitely not. But let's harness one another without actually sacrificing ebibitulo ozanti byaife. So when I talk about Ubuntu Bulamu and the law, Ubuntu Bulamu, according to my friend Bishop Samuel Sekamanya Lubogo, he says that the Ubuntu Bulamu is the torch of the law. Bishop Desmond Tutu says Ubuntu Bulamu is what binds, actually is the gift of the world, is the gift of Africa to the world, according to the late Bishop Desmond Tutu. According to Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King says, for whatever reason, our lives are inextricably bound. I cannot be what I'm meant to be until you are meant to be. So Ubuntu Bulamu nebye bintu what, for example, ni actually chewedo call it matoput in perhaps Rwanda by Dacheta Gachacha in Abasoga to know chito Ubuntu Bulamu in ono de fedabulido. So my advocacy is try to go back to the things that make quote unquote common sense, because ideally these traditional systems that call said quote, by the way, obo yenda bato yenda, they are adversarial in nature, they are hostile. Bwenkutwala mukoti notwala mukoti tujja kuyomba, lawyer wange wakugema mungalo daka turachi wa mugemi mungalo, you know those hostilities. So we are proponing for an ideology where we can actually settle in terms of what they call perhaps alternative dispute resolutions. We also will okunegotiating, mediating without necessarily actually being adversarial in nature.
Ndikulingirira olugendo lw'oli kwolekeramu nga lwida kubaamu a bit of okulegeyamu kwengeri ebintu ebikolebwamu nti nali ndikulingirira abandi kuba n'amateeka twali just within a joke n'ondi ku mulamuzi wa kooti entonga nina omusango nanki Justin Ekona namukoba nti ayi, do you really sit on TV and watch TV? Do you read newspapers? Do you really hear gospel y'abantu nga bawaya ku bintu? Nti wotyama omu ayambala bihudu ebyo oba bye bakoba butawulira abantu bye boogera nti you feel like you were in another country. So timubona bintu engeri ebitambulamu aye mubona ebyo bye babakobeire. Does it mean nti amateeka gano getutambulira kubanga galinga amazibe n'agakosiisa enkulankulana y'abantu abandi ni Africa nti twetaaga buntu bulamu tuve ku mateeka agagatubindinga ino?
Kyenkukobye nti in my book Freedom Through the Law, those are the arguments I say in terms of law being a dogma. Nga wenkobye nti Charles Dickens called it an ass. In America there's a saying, I think it was a popular judge Yakobati, this is a law of justice, not a law of people's justice. And there's a difference between those two statements.
A law of justice
and not a law of people's justice. So the argument is that
the justice is not for people.
According to them,
justice is justice.
According to them, there are parameters that the law is supposed to follow. Those dogmas, those principles of what they call precedents, that we know goberera. Although now our argument is that we should actually employ what they call equity. You know, in law, it's common law, and then there's what we call equity.
Yeah.
Equity came to aid the what? To aid the law in terms of bringing those ambits that were actually, because the law was actually rigid and inflexible. So my argument is to make it flexible but also tailor make the law, because what may be law Ebusoga may not necessarily be law Uganda, you know, in terms of whatever, you know, discourses that you may argue. What may be offensive Mubacholi may not necessarily be offensive.
But then it means we shall not have a universal law.
That is the point. So the question is
judging one agenda.
That is the point, and that's where we go wrong. Because if you are arguing in terms of a one single law that is going to unify the entire universe, that is an impossibility.
Do we need the court? Do we need the regional courts?
The argument we are propounding is that we need laws that are actually unique in terms of diversity. A law that can be able to accommodate diversity. For example, in our courts here, we choose, for example, in High Court particularly, to about assessors, or you know, they probably call them on the basis until they have an understanding or perhaps a unique understanding. But incidentally, binding. It's only the judicial officer's decision that is what? That is binding, which is very different from the American jurisprudence. In American jurisprudence, usually the people, they appoint a jury system. And actually what the juries decide is what the court goes with. The judicial officer only simply guides them in terms of what? In terms of ideologies following the law. But the people decide the law. Vox populi, vox dei. The voice of the people becomes the voice of God.
Meaning they don't quote that this was written and this is what we must follow. That they say, this is what is happening, and according to this, then let us do this.
I think it's rightly put this way, that you will never probably understand the ideology of a person or the problem of a person until you walk into their shoes. So the proposition that's propounded in terms of this discourse, is that we have to put ourselves in the ambits of this so-called, you know, people are committing offenses, but also be realistic to whatever they are trying to do. For example, let's argue in terms of murder. Here, we probably have only murder and manslaughter. In America, first degree, second degree, third degree murder. Different propositions in terms of omuntu engeri gy'akikozeemu. Me, I'm arguing in terms of an extension of the law. Give the law a breather. Don't make the law rigorous.
Give it allowance.
Give allowance in terms of what is sound and prudent. Because this perfect society that we are looking for, is impossible. Or quote in the Bible, we are just coming out of Easter. Let me quote scripture for you. Do you remember that actually Moses Yabakoba, yes, Yakoba, by the way, if someone commits an act of adultery, Moses says that you should stone them to what? To death. Yes, Yamuiramuch. What did he do? When they caught that woman in the act of adultery, remember? When she was presented. Absolutely. He squatted down and said, you know, bambuza n'ekibuuzo kiri ati muigulu eyo tedda kubaayo divorce biki yakati ebya marriage bikomawa you can't say yakati eiteeka lya Moses yaida because of your hardness of heart. You get my point? But the intention of God from the word go, by the way, God, from the intention of word go, he ain't 10 commandments at all. He wasn't interested in 10 commandments. In fact, his argument is that I will rule them according to my own way. It was only until Jethro Muganda wani imukolmi wa Moses where for purposes of administrative things, let us appoint judges. Let us appoint judges. And God was a little bit not very happy until fundamentally where it amateke ekumi, the law of Moses. And we remember the law. Now Jesus comes in as a salvation, a redemption, because people balemerero following amateka ekumi. So yes, you yaida yafa kumusalaba to become a remedy to that mateka ikumi. So we got, so your salvation, you're going to heaven is not because of your righteousness. It's because of Jesus' what? Righteousness. Because you, nga Jeremiah wakoba, you are imperfect.
There is something you did tell me at the beginning, that when you start the law, you can interpret all spheres of discipline. Now you are preaching using the law.
You see, because I argue and say that lawyers know everything. By the way, when you study law, you're privileged. That's why we call ourselves learned friends. You see, in law, we should have what they call bragging rights. So sometimes you should actually be braggadocious.
Okay. But then they want to ask, in absence of tight laws, did they take away the cover? Just tell us that society, how it will look like. In Uganda, tulina amateeka inagaliro gidi. Edukira watu wafirwa speaker. We had a discussion here.
Yes.
Eiteeka likobanga tukali muzika tulondo owundi. Ayo obuntu bulamu n'obuwangwa butukoba. Awo tubanga otulikoba nti ole twayenza afe tumu replacing mangu. Bono obuntu bulamu. But the law was saying you must do this and we followed.
No, it is because we are actually interpreting the law in a myopic way.
Really?
Yes. Why? Law should be looked at it in terms of a projective way. Mpera olikulingira speaker afire. Where the speaker is an individual, but speaker is acting on behalf of a nation. Yes, nation efiridwa, but the bigger entity is the what? The nation. So the nation is actually also mourning, but in its mourning should not be its sustenance should be sustained because of an individual who has actually done what? Again, I will quote scripture. Yes, Yabakoba. You remember when they came to him and said, your friend has died, Yakobatia. Let the dead bury the what?
The dead.
And they misunderstood him. You know, but his argument is that, and he said, your mother is, and said, my mother and father are those who do what I want. So for the purpose of the continuity of the nation, that is the bigger underscoring of Ubuntu Bulamu. Ubuntu Bulamu is not selfish. Ubuntu Bulamu goes beyond an individual. Ubuntu Bulamu goes beyond me as a person. Ubuntu Bulamu is looking at you in terms of your well-being. In terms of my brother's well-being, in terms of the unborn, in terms of the future generation. Dr. King Neyakoba, Martin Luther King, to do your job so well that the dead, the living, and the unborn cannot do it any better. So that is the underscoring of Ubuntu Bulamu.
Let me get from you, particularly Mushintu Chinu, because the president we are here, Yakoba, bana iseta keno mliterezemu. Shichibachi tu ifemu wango bu Africa tubanga otuli kobanti tulikwera biro obuwangwa. Did the parliament go wrong, or was the parliament right to quote the law?
Parliament is right, because parliament every single nebeta by legislators bamateka. And the law should be interpreted sacrosanctum. Ekigenda kyacho nta amateeka gaino goberanga wegali. Parliament yes, parliament will be iteeka. It is also bound by that law. Okutoka ngechichusiza yene ultimately. So Ngabwe Nkobe, look at it in the bigger perspective. When you look at it in the narrow perspective, then you're being selfish. Ezira ata kungubagira muganda wangera mukwano gwange, the honorable right speaker, who? Jacob Olanya. But in the interest of the better society, much as we wanted, because we cannot put a whole country to go into abeyance because of an individual. So we had to actually do something for the betterment of that individual and for the betterment of the better country. Singobona, he was given a state of honor, a state burial. Everything was done in honor. I mean, we mourned for about 5 days. The flag went down, you remember? So even there's no one who can dispute Yawakanati.
So everything
was Amateka in the bigger interest of Ubuntu Bulamu.
Okay. That is our first hour with Counsel Bogo Christopher Isaac. muwandiisi wa bitabo ate munnamateeka. I will soon become a land friend. Ndibona the beauty of being a land friend nti you can understand a wide range of ideas. Kampumulemu katono tune mu lwendo lw'amaadi bwe tunaaba tuyize musawa yaffe ey'okubiri tudda kubatenga tutandikira otavaawo program the platform. Kale dakiika ddiri 3 ne tuviire ku ssaawa 8 eddobiro bonaku olwaleero webala okubatenga okabona Baba TV neno TV y'obwashabazinga twenda kubatenga tusiima baganda baife abonabona abafiire okubatenga bayambaku abo abazira mu bisiibo ebibiri ebibeerewo ekisiibo eky'abakatuliki n'abakristaayo ekyali kyakawa n'ekisiibo kino eky'abaisiraamu na famire gye najjire mu redo nga bafiireyo okusiiba aye nga basiibulukira ku ffene aye ate nga ne ffene we bamugula bugule bali mu kibuga bazira wa kusula aye basiiba. You know, that strong feeling and that strong belief and faith. So obanga olina kyolina munange nenda kubiza ekintu kiri kirala yamba kwoyazira nabeere so touched nabona nti I cannot sustain mbetiike mbatwale wange so nakoba nti wali eyo nsiba kiwomu kyamukisa ni Bible etukoba nti kyamukisa okugaba okusinga okutola yamba kwoyazira niwe kubati kusiba kwonka embeera ekalimbi amawanga agali ku lukalu lwa Africa gakosebwa n'ekimbe esesebwe mukambu amawanga gano abagaba buyambi batuwaako empiya tusobola okuba ate nga mukaira akafaana nga the post covid effects tulisobola okuba ate nga tweyamba yabaayo agakola investment yabaayo n'agakaalikola investment so agakaalikola investment galikosebwa ino kyova olibona emiwendo gino giniinandiwa tikiri mu Uganda wonka twabanga abantu boogera lutalo lwa Russia amafuta abishi but these are post covid effects dino n'amawanga agandi biriyo so it's a clerical call nti wobanga olina kukoolina yamba oyakulire ine muliraanwawo yonoyo ogwobitako abantu okuli ekyeigulo butirero kyamagero. Kanso Isaac Kalubogo Christopher muwandiisi wa bitabo musomesa wa mateeka zena ajja kunsomesa amateeka by divine calling mbe land friend. Kanso obuntu bulamu n'amateeka President Dr. Museveni edinga nga akwotinga ino nga akoba nti tulina ebintu bye twakoopa okuva mu baatufuga kuuku tiyabindi nga tibikatukolera agandi n'amateeka n'aguguna tigaali gaife mu Afrika wano twalina obuntu bulamu idukira kooti de ekyalo nga dityama Isaac akoze omusango ayenze aleete embuzi n'enkanzu tugiwe mwene mukazi and everything
was settled.
Iwolowooza oti Uganda yali efaanana ekyo yali tasobola atambula ne tujja paka wano nti twandisobolenga okwemalira ebintu ebyo mayumba 10 mti twetaagawo kooti twetaagawo isa abalamuzi wekitiibwa Alfonso Owiny-Dollo twetaagawo amumyuka twetaagawo abalamuzi twetaaga palamenti byonna tulikola amateeka tugemme omuntu oyo alikola ensobi. Isn't the presence of the rigid law the source of crime in Uganda?
Rigidity gyoyogereku era nga bw'okiinonere bulungi is the cause of is a dilemma, is an enigma, is a debacle, is a big challenge to us as individuals. Kyenkobye nti ebiseera ebisinga courts now are optioning for kyebeta court annexed ADR oba alternative dispute resolution.
Nti mwire
mutese muikane mukubenga musobola okusolvinga problem eno kubanga bwenkobeere the traditional court system eri adversarial in nature. Problem yaife nti amateeka getulina right now were incepted by the order in council. Gava mu bazungu because we're colonial, entity of England, and therefore whatever was law in other jurisdictions of England
just copied and pasted it here.
Became in parimateria nga wetukoba in terms of our law. So twakopa and their argument whatever was inconsistent with their law, their argument was null and void to the extent of inconsistency.
Here.
Nti ekintu kyonna kyonna ekibwanga tikigemagana na bintu bye balowooza nti good law. Kyova obona nti bride price mu Rex versus Amkeyo They argued and said that while I think it was Justice Hamilton yakobati wife purchase, they call it wife purchase, chetu eta daware, you have reduced a woman into an entity, a chattel,
like
property. Like property. Until that was reversed in Alai versus Uganda, and subsequent cases like Mifumi, 1, Mifumi 2, you know, and also Wava Holdings, which make that amateka gagali amakaire tigakakola for purpose of that. But the problem ngawe one of the books I'm writing is called Inexhausting the Inexhaustible Buganda Ghost. Used, dumped, reused, and dumped.
Kyakolesebwa, kyasuulibwa, kyatoolebwayo, kabiri kyasuulibwa.
Argument yange nti 1900 agreement eno, which was the basis under which Uganda got independence and subsequent, you know, provisions, was an agreement gye baakola n'omwana yali minor, if you remember. At that point it was Judicial, not so. Ngakali minor. Now in law, tukoba nti a contract with a minor is void ab initio. But the exceptions, mulimu nti, okay, kale, if it's a contract of necessity. So argument here, if when mwakola 1900 agreement eno, nga muligezaku okoasinga Buganda, because they took advantage of Buganda, okuba nti Buganda nichibeta expansionist tendencies. Yayenda ino okugwanya. Actually, if you read the Bunyoro Kitara book, they say nti Bunyoro Kitara had actually almost extended as far as Kawempe. You know. So how many counties did Buganda have? For argument's sake, there were about 3. So all these counties that were actually, they have now, were actually an entity that were coerced from Bunyoro plus other entities because they wanted to become a bigger Buganda as an entity. The advantage, they were centralized. They were organized. So Abazungu Baida, they found them as what? Organized and centralized. So Baida, so it was easy for them. So 1900 agreement, Ngawe Nkobi, already in law there's what you call vitiating factors in contract. So vitiating factors, for example, mistake, for example, unconscionable designs or stuff like, you know, undue duress. Ebintu ebinebina webyayidamu wolingira 1900 agreement nengeje bagikola mwedaji wonati was done with a very, very unfair, you know, dealings, in a sense that this is a minor whose father had actually been extradited. Mwanga, you remember? Nikabarega, Babagema Babatwala. So there was, even the regents were appointing were actually appointed on behalf of were they actually elected? Were they actually representative of the people's interest? Were they actually condoned by the king? You see that 1900 agreement by virtue of itself is actually null and void ab initio. And therefore, if it's null and void ab initio, the question we have today, can we still rely on it in terms of guaranteeing Buganda's interest? Because Buganda, by the way, as an entity, has existed for over 700 years. 700 years as an entity. Now,
so we cannot quote anything affecting or in favor of Buganda using the 1900 agreement.
In my opinion, that's the question that is the unquenchable ghost, the inexhaustible ghost that Buganda has. In fact, I make my arguments in terms of the first Kabaka crisis, the second Kabaka crisis, and the third Kabaka crisis. Third Kabaka crisis in Jogera Kwano, my executive mandate, and it manifests itself in what forms? The burning of the Masiro, remember? The attempt by the Katikiro to go to Kayunga, remember? All that is written here. The birthday cake saga, remember? The coffin cake saga, remember the coffin cake saga? All that is talked about here.
They are not accidents.
They are not accidents because they were
attempts. Are they planned?
In my opinion, they are inexhaustible ghosts, as I told you. They are those aspirations that cannot be mentioned, but deep within them we know that every Buganda is interested in Buganda's independence as an entity.
I think we spoke it in English, but Buganda understand English. Tienza tushize munosoga. But chali ukoba nti eri ebintu ebidye bibawo nga for us to lowooza nti it's by accident. Of course, it is an accident.
And I don't, by the way, we should put a disclaimer. Some of them will make your ears say,
that's why
you get my point. Some of the arguments then propounding, I'm argumenting in. For example, the celebration of the Uganda Matters, we all celebrate Uganda Matters and jubilantly, and we argue and say the Catholics will abandon the Protestants. But you know, actually, Muslims were more Muslim matters in Namugongo than actually Catholics and Protestants put together.
What was the intention of fronting the Catholics than the Muslims.
You ask me, I will ask you. But as far as I'm concerned, those are political games, ideologies that are propounded by people who actually take advantage of others. And please don't quote me on that. I'll also make arguments because in Uganda there were about 3 centers. Like the Bible had that Golgotha part, you remember? Recently, so Uganda had 3 entities. One of them was Namugongo. Sekabaka Mutesa II actually is one who bundled up Muslims, about 70 of them. There is a mosque now opposite the Protestant shrine. Idi Amin actually who resided and built it there. Muslim matters are there more than Catholics and Protestants put together.
I don't remember them.
Ask them. The argument is that they don't momentarize individuals and stuff like that. They don't want to idolize stuff like that. That's perhaps an argument in terms of the Islamic jurisprudence. Mpirano, the Namasole saga, for example. There's an instance, for example, Namasole wanted to get him remarried, you know, but her mother, the mother of the king, you know, of Uganda king, Yaindo Kwira Mokolachi Okuwasa. But the Baganda said, no, it's not possible. And he went to his son, the king, and the king said, I'm the king, I'm the order, I'm the law. Okole. And he actually went ahead and contracted the marriage. But the man was shot. You know, it's also written here. There's a time when actually the king actually contracted the gonorrhea and syphilis. And the argument was, by the way, these are tricky and dicey things.
It's okay to very, of course, out with that will count.
Yes.
However, obere tube tukali ku nti okubaawo kwa
amateeka inception
so rigid.
Gaida gatya okuba nti gali kuife, do they serve our purpose?
Yesobero otulaze engeri egaidamu okubaawo kwago kituyambye okulankulana oba kituyambye just kusigaza buwangwa bwabale.
Let me make this point a bit clearer to you. Nti na education is system yaife. Oluzungu luno tradition system yejetogera is by the one extension of a colonial legacy. Actually, we are now under neo-colonialism of sorts, without actually knowing so. And we are still their servants for all intents and purposes. Until we learn to discover ourselves. I think it was Churchill who was quoting someone who said, the great Alexander, the people of China buried in slavery for a long time under the British until they learned to say the word no. So there are times when you have to just rebel, and righteousness rebel, and say, you know what, we're going to form our own systems. I think you remember when during time of COVID challenges, there's a country, an African country, was Malaysia? What country was not Malaysia? One of those countries, Madagascar, I think. We were discovering there's some kind of aid.
Yeah, it was Madagascar.
COVID. And remember, they actually had to be disbanded even out of the World Health Organization. You know, so this ideology that everything African is bad, everything African is negative, is a misnomer, and I think should be disbanded.
Tusobola tutia cause kyo tuse kukabiri kikulu nti Professor Gwanga yali yakaida yiye. The argument was tibaida chikiriza.
True.
The gods of earth abazungu bakatonda abokunsi nti they decide the genuity nti kino kituukaine tibaida kuikiriza ekiva mu Africa.
And you know why? Because of the capitalist tendencies. That's the reason why you're seeing the war between Ukraine and what? And Russia. When NATO is now supporting Russia, you know, rather Ukraine as against what? Russia. Because this ideology of one world order, everything that will over nature to choose a one world order, or Java no visible. When we were sometimes attending a conference in China, there were some professors from America. When Chinese professors stood up and said, we Chinese are actually independent in our thoughts. And the Americans said, look at these guys. You guys who are under dictatorship. And they said, they qualified Chebayagera. Bakati, tuli independent or ensonga tibetukola biyambe gwanga leife imwe be dependent on lobbying. You know, in America there's what we call lobbyists. Lobbyists actually make laws. They go and say people like those big guys, the Bill Gates, you know, the guys of Facebook, they go behind and make lobby and say, you know, big corporations. So everything, think about it that even COVID is actually patented.
COVID?
Yes. Think about
not an accident.
It's actually patented by Dr. Ate omukulembeze w'ekitongole ekifuga ebyobusawo. mwene najicovidinga. So you can patenting. So you ask yourself, even HIV is actually patented. So you ask your things and say, what is the problem? Where are we going? Or are we still under some kind of blanket thrown upon us? That's why I told you from the beginning, we should not understand, but over what?
But
Overstand.
even when you overstand, you've not got the point, because the point in the middle, either you see it down or you see it up. You've not seen it.
Listen, you have seen it. There was an argument before in the early times of America. I told you an African was actually 3/4 of a human being. Are you aware? For about 100 years in America.
3/4
of a human being. You were a little bit less than an ape. And they could not let you vote. They could let a woman vote, but not a black man vote.
Because he's not a human being.
Because it's not. So when you see people like Rosa Parks, the Reverend Martin Luther King rebelling and stuff like that, then you understand their pain and their story. We have to redeem them. There were times where I was saying that your IQ as a black person is actually lower than that of a what? Of a white person. Those schools of thoughts. And even sometimes propounded by black ideologists. You know? By W. De Bell, for example. Yavanga Yakobe Bigambo. But you see, for them, they were actually... Malcolm X made this point. Yakobat, there is a difference between a kitchen nigger and a slave nigger. A kitchen nigger does not have to revolt. Kubanga emere ya mukama wefika ojakola ki? Jali yako. Amadi tika kola ki? Tika mukulu. But the slave nigger inside in the fields, amadi gakuboyo. Gwe bakoba tulima. So there's a difference, there's a variance. So you must understand that.
So the kitchen nigger is comfortable to be where he is.
Absolutely. Because
and he doesn't want to leave.
Absolutely. He's in his comfort zone.
Baba TV obwachabazinga. Edasi kama 22 kusawa 8 edobwire bona olwalero. Tidio bye tuli kwogera ku muli bitegeera. Amateeko okubaawo mu Iwanga inyeri ya Uganda tigali gaife. Baga tuleetera wano. Aye tulaga nti twenda ino ga respecting ati twenda nagamena. Era omuntu yajja yakuba omuntu. I have my friend. Alina business ye omukozi yatunda eryato lye. Watunda eryato lye. Mwene eryato yajja yamukoba nti mina watunze eryato lyange. Ole yamukoba ati kola kyokola kasitana litunze. You know, mu buntu bulamu muli omuntu afuna obusungu. Oyamukuba mu engumi. Ole yalumukira ku poliisi yakoba ati ole yankubye. Era ono yakajja yedino ati oyo namuwa eryato eryo mukozi wange. Yes, tufuna mukuba mu engumi. Kumulamuza ati wakuba. Tutolewo ebyeryato, tutolewo byashi omusango gwakukuba. Amateeka gano tusobola tutya okugeetoolamu tuleete mu obuntu bulamu. Era buli gyatuyamba tutya okusobola okuba nga tubanisanite mu community.
Ebiseera ebisinga self defense eri permissible mu mateeka. Bwe nkusuna most likely ninza okuwiriza sena nakukolaki nakusuna. When it ceases to be self defense in terms of the propensity obuzito bwenkozesa okuwiriza. Nkusunye iwe otwere omundu kolaki kunkuba. There's a difference. They will probably charge you for murder, you know, or grievous bodily depending on ubanga onkubye obubino. So why no kuba variance in terms of proposition? It's the same thing that happened to Kanyamunyi case wajiwulira.
Yeah.
Akulumbuire motokayo. Absolutely. Ole yavaya. And he went actually and you know bakola matoput yafukamira yawa ente yetonda not so. Era bamusoniwa. In fact, the court, according to Justice Mobile, which is actually written in my book, I argue it in terms of, I think I argue it in terms of executive mandate as well, but more important in Ubuntu Bulam, by the way, because I quote it in Ubuntu Bulam. Justice Mobile probably would have even given a more heavy punishment.
To Kanyamunyi.
Yes, but I think he took in cognizance of the fact that wali wechali chikoleiwa okwapizinga kuchi emberere. You get my point? So that's the reason why maybe he wasn't that very, you know, extreme when Manko says Chigambecho. So Ubuntu Bulamu Ngawe Nkobe should actually be employed in the law. The law is rigid and should be interpreted in terms of its rigidity. But the law Nga Moses Nga Yesu Yabakoba came because of your hardness of what? Of hearts. But if you employ Ubuntu Bulamu, then you should be able to actually ono mwene yale teteka ne Yakoba turned the other cheek. You remember? When he said turning the other cheek, he was very mindful that, by the way, when I turn the other cheek, there will be pain. Not so. Yakoba ati omuntu bwakutolanga ku kooti yo muweeki muwe n'essaati. Not so. When he died on the cross, like he died recently, remember? The devil celebrated into yakoze atya awere. Now on the third day, was it yesterday or today?
Sunday.
Yes, Sunday. He rose again. Not so. And the scriptures say he went there, yatola ebisumuzo kwani ku devil, and then there was jubilation in terms of victory. So obuntu bulamu, there's what they call a given paradox. Chebeta winning by losing. It's very important in terms of application of what we do today. In although Yakobati, he who has not sinned should be the first person to cast the stone at what? At that person. Iwoli gunsalira iwetosobyangaku. Oli kumpula chendiko. Ni katonda mwene out of his modesty. Read my book called Intelligent Design. Another book about the African ontology and African ethics, where I argue whether or not Africa had a god. That will be that will be another argument for another day. But the proposition I make is that we need to understand nti obuntu bulamu is apathizing, leaving the other person's pain. Understanding the other person is ekibi kiro zena nsobola kikola. You know, and therefore I should understand and put myself in a circumstance nti zena nsobola okuba ngoli bwasobola okola. So I should employ. Not that we should just simply apply obuntu because there should be no law, there should be no guidance. Say akukola obi bumusoni. No, that's not the argument I'm making. I'm saying there should be guidelines, there should be procedures to enable non-original following, just like our cultures.
If law doesn't have eyes and it is blind now, obuntu bulamu, are we putting eyes on the law?
That is the torch. See? Absolutely. That is the torch of the what? Of the law. When quote is Bishop Sekamanya Samuel Lubogo, who said, actually I quoted them and said, obuntu bulamu is the torch of the what?
Of the law.
Of the law. So when you don't have the torch of the law, you're missing the point. I think last time I read you a script, something in I think Merchants of Venice, where Portia ni Shylock. You remember? Where let me cut off a pound of what? Flesh from your body. A chifi. Kubanga olemerwa okola ki? Endagaano yakobye nti olina okusala kuki? Ekifi.
Singa numerwa esasula.
Era kati munansoni wa biro byati be nina okusala kuki? Ekifi nti kale. Oli kati be oba n'ekyo kale. Ekifi kitegeeza ki? Ekifi. Aye singa oba omusaayi gola gutya? Ogutoona. Ebibyo byonna tubitwala. Bagwadro.
Of course omuntu asobola asala kifinga.
Absolutely. So that's the argument. So nole yakobati iwe oyenda okutolamu. I think before you remove the speck of what? The speck in my eye. First remove the clog in your own eye. So the variance of ubuntu bulamu should be an applicability of, because our bodies are imperfect. There is no perfection in us. Our bodies are perfect. Are not perfect beings, and therefore they are susceptible okuba nti the eringa buli kiseera.
Council, can you judge the rigid law we have now in Uganda nti yona ekolesebwa mu mateeka? Bakozeisa amateeka okwapplyinga amateeka mu butuufu bwago.
Absolutely, because many times sometimes actually in most cases there are external influences mu bintu ebyo. Omuntu ajja yayiba enkoko bamusiba emyaka 7. Ole yayiba $1 billion bakati tiyadiba. You remember those wazidabudulizi bumala, you know, and they are there. There are times when ajanga okuvisitinga some inmates. You know, we call them inmates. Ngojire okuvisitinga some of your clients in Rosita prison.
Yeah.
And some of those guys, they are there and say, we are here, aye. The moment the myaka esatu kasaji wako, we are very rich. But to serious, yes.
They make money.
Yes, they make that. They stole, they are away, and they are incarcerated, and they are waiting for the 3 years, and they are going back and they say, "Wetunairayo, mwidatu ulira." You get the point.
So the law, amateeka amakakali agaliwo. Abagakolesa tebakolesa amateeka okwapplyinga amateeka amakakali.
Ngawe nkobye, it is a question of judicial discretion. Either bakobanga at a good lawyer is the one who knows the law. Not so. Actually, the one who knows where to find the law, not the one who knows but the one who knows where to find the law. I hear, don't quote me. Nowadays they say a good lawyer is the one who takes the judge for lunch.
Kampumule mu katono wenaba ngandize tujja kuba atenga tumaliriza mu kitundu kyaffe ekisembayo nizo samu omwesigo tavaawo. kale tuli mu kitundu kyaffe ekisembayo kya programu eno the platform. Producer wange dda kuntera ku namba yange awo eya whatsapp ndafuna ku bubaka munange obuva yoli inayinza obutafuna kaire kalungi kuba ate nga nkubira ku masimu. Of course ensonga dde tuli kwogeraku nsonga dda amateeka kutafuta mateeka. When I become a land friend and I become a lawyer, shall I become a bad lawyer who understands where the law is, or I will become a good lawyer who takes the judge for lunch? It's kind of question that I will need to answer when I'm there. But I think I will be the one who understands where the law is, and I will quote the law to put those who take the judge for lunch in courts of law. Then that marries. I just love that. And by the way, it's the reality. Those people abalikolesa amateeka agaliwo, are they of clean hands? For us, we can say, counsel n'omulamuzi ansalira omusango, corruption. Doesn't he have any taint, any scars of corruption on his hands?
Ekibuzo kyobuuza kikulino. Mu equity, eri ekigambo ekikoba ati he who comes to equity must come with clean hands.
Yeah.
Era nikyo olibuuza. And equity will aid the vigilant on the other hand and not the indolent. So the question of oberi abantu abatali anguzi, to use that word,
nti nabajosalira abali benguzi,
is a question of debate in terms of arguments of today. But I would like to believe nti society ekalimu abantu abalungi era abantu abagoberera amateeka nga galina okukola ki nga galina okuba. I'm also aware.
No, can't I want to quote you? Do you think we have, and on which percentage, abantu abajijosalira abantu emisango at level of ba judge, abajosalira abantu emisango egy'obuli obwenguzi babasibe nga they have clean hands?
The good thing I'm not a judge.
Yeah, you are not a judge.
But as a philosopher, if I argue in terms of philosophy, I am aware that nga wenkobere nti abantu, human nature is susceptible to sin, to temptations.
Yeah.
Ebikemo bingi. Ni Yesu mweno mwana wa Katonda, we're celebrating his birth. Remember? Do you remember that Yesu bamutemptinga? Are you aware?
Nga amaze okusiiba.
Galina kusiiba.
Duly?
Mwidungu. The devil came and said, by the way, nze nsobola okuwa byona byokola ki byoyenda. Kasobola n'okulota. And the man looked at the guy and said, "Hey devil, are you serious?" Akali nsobola n'okwongera ku ABCD. Yeah, about 3 times, and he said, "Go away from me, devil." By the way, even the person, remember the scriptures talk about an individual called Peter. Yakati, Peter, on you, I will build the what? The church. Oidukira. Peter was the first pope. Era the Catholic Church, the entire church is built on Peter's legacy. Because he was a pope. He's the very guy.
Yes.
You remember? So susceptibility yokuba nti human nature can take, credence over people is something that I cannot deny. But I would also want to argue nti eri abantu abali very strong, very determined, and they will do the right job.
Okay.
They will do the right job without actually compromising themselves.
Currently nga tukalichusa the judicial system je tulina okwongera, let me use it this way, nga tukali kutamaiso ku mateeka agaliwa amazibe okugatamu obuntu bulamu. What do you think ekyetaaga okushuukamu the judicial system?
My argument would be this. Right now, Nicola Chebeta course descriptors of about 4 course units. Then ndikwenda kwa inculcating amu Ligam Bakarias, Chebeta LLB, joli kwenda okusoma. I think we need to revamp the LLB. By the way, I think we need to decolonize our education system so that we frame it
We need to decolonize it.
Because
it must be a very big task.
Because it's framed on a colonial legacy. One of this book, Ubuntu Bulamandalo, is now being taught in major law schools as African jurisprudence, one of the in jurisprudence law. And I would encourage any serious law school to adopt it as a course unit. Because my argument here is in terms of African jurisprudence, trying to go back to our roots, finding our roots. There are other subjects we need to inculcate Muligamba carriers as core subjects. For example, psychology in law. Psychology should be a subject ya law.
In my degree of theology.
And in law it's not even taught there. Yet lawyers we assume to know everything, as you are aware.
So you are not learned.
We are taught the tactics that I told you. We are taught the skills.
Okay.
So we may not necessarily engage in the medical thing or the engineering, but we know what is required. So we are, and we are the only people who have that privilege. That's why we call ourselves learned people. There is another content of subject, cyber law, because that's where the future is going.
Yeah.
Should also have been calculated in law school. Forensic law, for example. You remember how many generals have been killed, poison, DNA, blood splatter, all those aspects. I mean, forensic law should actually be incorporated. Cyber law should be incorporated. Oil and gas should be incorporated, because we are bragging about Uganda, Okubantua discovering oil. Do we need
the legal knowledge in oil and gas still?
We absolutely do, because if we are going to pride in this oil, by the way, when I was doing my master's at a certain level, I was about to defend my viva voce in terms of my master's, because I specialize in oil and gas. One of the people asked me and said, why are you actually call a chintu chino atengo chidi into kalita nikawo exploring na oil? So I was almost taken off balance until someone said, no, but you see, you're doing a prospective study. You know, before
what we feel that we shall be there.
Absolutely. Before you fall into it, you are now learning, to navigate around it. You are learning from countries like Nigeria, undergo and a resource curse, so that you avoid things like the Dutch disease. Those arguments. So these are the things we're talking about. So prospective studies are actually encouraged in scholarism. And that's what I told you, that the difference between scholarism and intellectualism. I told you the law of the negation or the negation, beginning from the thesis to the antithesis to the synthesis. And I told you that the problem with that now is that, for example, certificate holders are considered as non-starters. Diploma holders in most cases are considered as raw material. Degree holders like you are considered as a loss to knowledge. Master holders are considered generators of knowledge. PhD holders are considered as custodians of knowledge. Then the professors are considered as philosophers of knowledge, as was said by my friend from the Center for Critical Thinking and Alternative Analysis, Dr. Balunywa, in that context. So
those who have degrees, that is loss of knowledge. How can be a diploma holder be a raw material? Baba TV, the TV was abazinga dashika mbuzayo 10 sobola okuba atenga tubano. Council, I've just enjoyed a lot of your knowledge. Hello moderator, this is Mpiangu Dennis Swanyi. Thanks for bringing that knowledgeable epitome. Dr. Lugogo taught me to see you and really appreciate his efforts in changing our society. Is a regal encyclopedia to be looked at, hopeful to see him as Attorney General in the near future. Every time people feel like if you are performing something, you must hold a position in serving government. Currently, decolonizing the education system of Uganda. It is a feeling and interest of one individual, the Professor Lubogo. But the decolonized education, it is a source of income to those people you are going to work with to decolonize it. Do you think you will be successful?
Absolutely. That is the challenge. And many times some of the things that we face in life need oppositions, do COVID, because people have built empires around
the system.
Absolutely. Around these ideologies. So changing them, you're going to fight them.
like changing the world order.
Absolutely, changing the world order is going to cause a lot of backfires. But you see, I think Edmund Bank Neyakoba, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. Absolutely. So you move. Sometimes you have to be alone. Even the books that we have, I have a lot of criticism from different people. There are those who argue plagiarism, there are those who argue this, there are those who argue that. But you see, do something before you critique someone. It's only beautiful mango that is stoned. Are you aware?
Those rotten ones that fall down, they are used as stones.
Absolutely.
To beat another
so,
one.
In life, you have to be, life is a journey, okay? Not a destination. That one you must understand.
Yes, sir.
Life is a journey, not a destination. I think it was Ralph Waldo Emerson who said in 1875 that if a man can build a better house or make a better mousetrap than his neighbor, even if he builds his house in the woods, the world will make a beaten path to his door. So what am I saying? Do your job regardless. Do your job so well that the dead, the living, and the unborn cannot do it any better.
At that level where we feel like it is the loss of knowledge. Let me quote you. People at the loss of knowledge, and the people at the raw materials, people make research. When I made a degree and I did research. Those research we submit in as universities and what? At which level do you credit that level of research?
You see, the kind of research you're doing is actually not research. Those are extended essays.
Yeah. How can you underrate our efforts calling them essays?
Those are extended essays because you see, research is a very big paradigm for purposes of argument. You have to have theoretical frameworks. If I argue in terms of what was your theoretical framework, perhaps in terms of your research paper that you did, you probably will not give it to me. I was
looking at the advancement of technology.
That's the topic. I'm talking about theoretical framework. You see the problem? That's what you're doing, extended essays. Come to us.
Big essays.
Come to us, we teach you the grasps, the antecedents, the principles of doing what they call research. By the way, there could also be a difference between legal research and this social research methodology that you probably adapted, you know, in terms of conceptual vis-a-vis theoretical frameworks. Okay? So in terms of collecting data, in terms of sample size, you know, in terms of scope of study, in terms of literature review, in terms of statistical data, all those aspects. So research has a big, a big umbrella. So it depends on the kind of research you're doing. I do supervise research at undergraduate and even at master's level. I do also help many at PhD level. But the point I'm trying to underscore is that you must understand at what level you're doing your research. Oli jukolera ku level ki. Era research ejja kuyamba ki. Some people do research from the thesis point of view. Others do it from a synthesis point of view. Others from an anti-synthesis point of view. Okay? Because a synthesis is now you're churning, you're regurgitating the information. You're making it user-friendly. You're adding on to knowledge, as I told you, rather than just simply passing on information as it were. Quoting, what are you adding on to knowledge? There was a preacher, Omubulizo Injiri Yaja somewhere, I think in Russia. I will not mention his name, but a prominent preacher. And one of the people stood up and said, do you know flash disks? Nizena dikola. Oliaka, do you know whatever's earphones nizena dinvetinga? Do you know an iPhone, whatever nizena kola micro? Do you know micro? So bamubuza, by the way, for you from Uganda, what kola? Yeah, I will not tell you what I told them. But we assume maybe someone just cracked a joke and said, I think he said, I called down the Holy Spirit. You know. So
in other words, as we summarize, because it's also another topic of discussion, my point was institutions grade students at levels because of what they've done. And those are the people that are coming in the field to perform. Do you think at that level, even the institutions, to use that level, that people have done research and they have written this and this, batukana buti batukana okujja okola emirimu because batukakaisa ku level at all institutions?
Ekibuuzo ky'obuuza kirungi ino. in university institutions and higher education, Wibometrics. Wibometrics is a system of measuring the level of accreditation in terms of ranking universities. You'll be amazed. You'll be amazed. You'll be amazed in Africa, for example, maybe the leading scholars and authors are people like Professor Mamdan, intellectually, in terms of the world, Professor Oloka Onyango, you know, and there's another lady, I think, the ones who ranked, I think, best in Africa, if I remember, in the world in terms of rankings. In terms of university rankings, under Wibometrics, you may find Makerere coming on, you may find other universities coming on, but ranking of universities is dependent upon the research. Ekolerwa. Chobona nti research is extremely important. You cannot negate research. Omuntu yena alobera research okubaawo. Actually, it begs the question, how many research institutes did we know mu Uganda, other than Center for Basic Research, the one by Professor Mamdan, and the one for Center for Critical Thinking and Alternative Analysis, the one that we are part of, you know, maybe PILAC, maybe Huripec. We don't have so many research centers here.
But the government has so much shown its interest in developing research and science-based. I've been seeing President Museveni saying science-based something. We're paying sciences. We're investing in sciences. Do you see that Uganda reaching at that level? It
would be a good thing. Recently, President Museveni donated some good money to Professor Ogwang, if you remember, after the COVID issue, and then to the Gulu University for purposes of, you know, expansion of science and technology and research, basic stuff. That would be good. But perhaps we should also put in things like innovations, prizes, you know, incentives.
For best performance.
Yes, incentives. When I came up with, actually, I was the only person who was able to see beyond COVID, you know, because when I did what they call a sui generis law app, which is the only app in the world, by the way, which has everything you ever need in law. Go to Harvard, you won't find it. Jamu Yale Toida Jizula. That one-stop center, in all laws in terms of Ligam Bacarius, which is LLB, it has Ligam Magister, which is LLM, it has Ligam Doctor, which is PhD, it has got court forms and precedents, it has got audio notes, all voice notes, it has got law movies, it has got encyclopedia for court forms and precedents, one-stop center on your phone where you can just go on Play Store, waji downloading or wajita kuchi, kuisimu, and you can be free of charge, by the way. Sui generis. Sui generis. Sui generis means the best, the best of the best, you know. And perhaps something that is important for you, again, as a student of law, is that you have to learn to be what they call, you need to what they call animus optimum legalis, who operates under what they call animus opibusci parati, to become magnum opus in a sui generis generation.
I will understand those things and I'll become a land friend. Professor, there is a lot of time we can have, but we feel like we are crippled by the time currently now. Good evening, Baba TV. I'm Victor. Thanks so much for that show. This country needs such knowledgeable people to change our society. I have liked that guy. Kindly beg to get. Okay, I'm a student of law and wish to share with him. Thanks. Oyakusimi. Hello. This is Baguma here. Mr. Lubogo, my wonderful lecturer, is a blessing to me in my legal study journey. My greetings to him. Then you must be knowing him. Thank you. Thanks to the animus optimum legalis, Mr. Isaac Lubogo. We are learning this is legal supermarket. Ibrahim Sande, LLB, IU. Okay, hello moderator. Greetings from Mr. Isanga John Walter at Mutai. This is Ali Naba Agnes Alice. I adore Mr. Lubogo's exceptionability. All the best, doctor. I enjoy your books. Okay. Osobola weereza just bubaka WhatsApp number yeri ku screen yawo tidaf na masim but weereza obaka wandika text otaweereza audio. Tusobola okuba ate nga tufuna. Good evening Mwesigwa. I'm Michael Lugoja Nseko from Munyonyo. I appreciate for the good job done. Yes, 100% legal. He has helped in the developing and structure of Uganda's economy in the addition of Uganda. Okay. just have another message here. Okay, just just send a message on WhatsApp. Don't send SMS, send WhatsApp. Good evening, Baba. This is Agatha, tuned in live from Natete. God bless our Professor Lubogo. Cause is a blessing in the law of fraternity. Mwebale kubatenga mwena msima. Of course, sometimes when somebody is speaking about something and there is no one following, it is something which is not good. Kale. Those messages can come out. Mwena abali eyo msolo okubatenga mtu gobera. Nenda tuumbe. Of course, there is a number of projects. I was looking at the other book, what they this stand, the Ubuntu Bulamu, Busoga, and a lot. We shall dedicate some time to somesa abantu amateeka and the history ni mitsedo ni secrets ediri mu bitabo muno abantu babitegeere. Nja kusaba wumbe just have kansoke nsome obubaka buno buva Honorable Jan. I would not be a legal profession today if I hadn't met Counsel Lubogo. This is Honorable Jan. Nakueleza message eyo. Good evening, that professor knows the law. Blessings. Mwebale okubatenga mtubweni. Kale niwa asembayo. Hello, I'm Michael Wabika from Uganda. Mwebale okubatenga mutubona. You can just have your parting remarks.
Solis populi,
yeah.
Solis vei. The welfare of the people is supreme. Solis vox populi, vox dei. The voice of the people is the voice of what?
Of God.
Is the voice of God.
And next time we shall just begin from there.
Absolutely.
Is it that the voice of people is still the voice of God?
It's a good question. That's why I would like to begin there next time when I'm arguing in terms of my book called Intelligent Design, where I ask whether or not Africa had a God, or was your God imported?
Imported from somewhere.
Yes.
And it was immersed here. And we believe that it is our God.
We will find out next time.
Thank you. Of course, I can't underrate your time you've given us and your precious knowledge. Such moment of time, some people pay for it, but lucky to you that has watched us from since we began up to this time, that when we are saying our parting remarks. Nenda kusima, nenda kwebaza. Yosinze okubatenga tufuna obubaka bwentasome wano tudakwongera okubatenga tuba naye professor no ndakumweza tuongera okubatenga tulingera ina ebitabo bingi byawandiise ng'ebindi bitulaga ebyafaayo bya Uganda, ebindi byalaga entafuta y'amateeka. Of course niwona abatoliija asoma amateeka eri yampeza message ati oliyesomesa bana Uganda bana basoma amateeka niwona abatoliija asoma amateeka, but at least you can understand it. Wakitegeera waba kunedo basics edisooka. Timu yange gye nkoze nayo nenda kubatenga mbebaza up to this late mwabatenga mukaaliwo. Ninza Samo Mwesigwa omukubiriza wa program on the platform katwire monaku already Katonda singa anabatenga buganga mwire bulungi. Isa efichabazinga wabusoga William Wilberforce Kadumbula Gabula na Diopo okuna lata fumvwa ebyanda